Who did I become being child free? This is the Lenora Faye Show. Hello, and welcome to this episode called Child Free. Who Did I Become? My name is Lenora Faye. I am your host. I am your favorite podcast host. And I am going to share with you some insights into my choice about not having children. And I will say that I am probably going to take this deeper than I've ever explained before, which, given I had another podcast called Child for Girls for 3 years, I would have thought that I had said everything I needed to say on this subject. And I firmly believed that until recently when I realized I have not shared fully everything. I wasn't ready to share fully everything. And don't worry, I've not changed my mind. I don't regret my choice. There's a deeper understanding, a deeper awareness, which tends to happen as you get older. And when I recorded that show with Kristen and Isabel, I was in my 30s. And now I have graduated to my 40s and have been 40 for a few years now. So I am ready to speak from a deeper place about what I come to understand. And that question, who did I become, has been rattling around in my brain for 2 days. I have not allowed myself to answer that. I have not prepared anything for this episode because I realized that this is very much where many of us are who have consciously made the decision to not have kids and have been at peace with this decision and have lived this decision for decades now. So get something to drink, get a snack. We're going to chat. We're going to talk. I'm going to talk. You can send me your thoughts, your notes, everything. By the way, if you like to troll people on this topic, please, I beg you, leave a comment. Leave a comment. I love trolls. I got really good at that. And I'll explain that a little bit later, why they're actually helpful. And I don't mean just the algorithm. I don't even know what I'm going to say here. And I've known that. I knew that. I was putting on this wig. By the way, I guess I should, for those of you who are listening, I will offer a description of my outfit for each episode now that we're in video as well. And was putting on this wig and I haven't worn this wig in a while and I'm like, there's a lot of hair. This is a very, very, very long wig. So yeah, it's very my natural hair is not remotely that long. So I was putting this wig on and I call it my mermaid wig. I don't name my wigs, but this one is turquoisey blue with like hint of pink. I'm wearing a very long rainbow colored maxi dress that's mostly covered by the wig. It's one of my favorite dresses, very comfortable. I only wear dresses and they're all comfortable, but this is one of my favorites. Haha, favorite. See, there you go. By the way, you'll get to know this as as the show progresses, you'll understand why I call it the favorites. Well, I'll talk about what favorite feedback is. Favorites, this is the name for the audience. Favorite, play on my name. You'll get it. You guys are smart. I say to the universe, I only have an intelligent audience. Because oddly enough, in the child-free space, I've come across some simple-minded characters over my years of public advocacy work. And everyone has their place, and that's fine. I have an intelligent audience, so you'll understand what favorites mean, especially when you see it spelled. The Canadian way. 46% of you who watch the show are American, and I love that. I love that. But I'm gonna have to teach you about Canadian spelling. For those of you listening on YouTube, you can go to YouTube or watch the video version on Spotify. Eventually, I think video will come to Canada for Apple, but Canadians, we don't get the full everything that the lovely Americans get all the time. So we're working with it. So that is the outfit. Mermaid wig, very long, turquoise, pink-ish, somewhere in there, and a very bright rainbow dress to talk about not having children. All right. So like I said, if you are familiar with my prior work with the Child for Girls podcast, that I know I shared a lot about my journey there. But the thing about this show is this is an uninterrupted stream of consciousness. Therefore, I have the complete freedom to share from the depths of my soul what I want to say. And this topic of choosing to not have children, choosing to not have children. I mean, it's been my entire life. But speaking publicly was not something I was ever interested in doing. I wasn't aware I could do that. Kind of like realizing I didn't have to have kids. I thought you just had to. So let's start from the beginning because while I made that choice when I was young, because I never felt called to be a mother, and I'll elaborate on that. And I believe that most of you who are listening are very solid in your choice. You're not questioning, you're not doubting. We're all navigating our issues as we all do. But there will probably be those of you who are on the fence, what we call fence sitters. There will be those of you listening who tried to have children and couldn't, or you're still trying, and that term is childless. And some of you who couldn't have kids and are child free not by choice or child free by circumstance. I mean, that is one thing I learned over the years is the terminology is there's a lot to choose from. And I do maintain, and I was really harsh about this in the early days of the Child for Girls podcast because I, I tried to refine myself as I go along. Not same message, just refined delivery, more myself, more comfortable. The wigs help my early day I can't watch the pot like I go watch or listen. It's great. It's fantastic. I love I'm still in, those girls are my co-hosts for life. Child for Girls, it's a band. It's never breaking up. We've said what we need to say and maybe we'll do a reunion episode. But my delivery is I mean this is personal growth. And I also see as you evolve in what you do, it's amazing because I mean I watched that those first really the whole show, but really the first season prior to the wigs and prior to me like relaxing. It was a journey. And so my delivery is very intense and very harsh in some aspects. And my views have not changed, but I've, evolved in my delivery of it and my understanding has grown. So I probably won't be as harsh on some things. So, and then some I will probably be more harsh now because I know how to articulate myself or, working on it. So anyway, originally, the terms of what child-free meant, I was, and I still maintain my stance with this. I am child-free by choice. I always knew that I did not want to have children. I did not realize it was a choice until I was 22. So I'll share that story because it's important, especially if those of you who are still, again, like I said, fence sitter, or you have just recently decided you don't want to have children and you're just finding your footing with what that means. That this is why people share, and this is why it is important to share because there is something that will resonate with you. And this again, this is not me saying how to navigate life or anything. This is how I've done it. Something will land with you and inspire you to explore the choice more or to feel even more confident. It's up to you, but sharing helps. So, child free by choice, meaning I realized I had a choice to have kids or to not have kids. I knew that I did not want to have kids. Therefore, I made a choice to not have kids and have not looked back. So when I was around 7 or 8, I think 7, because I know what town I was living in, and I had to go to church 3 times a week. So we had something what we and one day I will explain that, but it's complicated. So we had something called Sunday morning meeting, and church services were not in church buildings, they were in homes. And I remember from a young age watching women with number of children. And I didn't come from a religion. It's there's no name. It's a Christian, it's a secret religion, a secret sect. Again, you can use the C word if you want. It's yeah, it works. Um, so it wasn't like, oh, you had to have so many children or things like that. But, you got married and had kids. That's what you did. And from a young age, I saw women in these morning services. They would, have their kids. Their husbands were often away working, or, it was just the energy was kind of frazzled, which I understand. And this is the thing. I can understand that now more than, of course, more than I did when I was 7. But I saw all, how women were. They had children. The kids were all over the place. They were trying to stand up and share what we call testimony and all these things. And there was nothing, bottom line, there was nothing peaceful. I didn't see anything peaceful. Now, my household of 2 kids and 2 parents and a dog was pretty peaceful. And I was probably ideally a loud child, but kind of, just played the piano, but wanted to be very loud. I didn't know podcasting existed yet. So, it was foreshadowing. Lenora is going to be loud. Um, so there was something about it that did not excite me. Okay, fair enough. I was a kid. But, as a young girl, you're taught, you're given dolls. You're going to be a mom one day, blah, blah, blah. You hear it from birth. I asked my brother about this, who has 2 children. He has 2 children. And I asked him one time, I said, were you ever told that? Like, one day you'll be a dad, you'll have kids. He's like, no, all I did was play on the playground. Didn't think about it ever. Here, by the age of 7, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to grow up, and which is fine. I'm excited to grow up, but I'm gonna have to have kids. I'm gonna have to have a husband. I'm gonna have to be a mother, and something didn't sit with me that way. But whatever. I guess I had to do that. So that was my mentality. And you just fall into that pattern, or at least I fell into that pattern of, what are you gonna name your kids and all these things. And I remember, at the time, so I was born the end of 82, 1982. And the Babysitter's Club books, because I grew up not allowed to watch TV or movies. So we didn't have a TV in the house, but I obviously was allowed to read. So the Babysitter's Club books were all the rage then. And I thought, well, I will name my kids after the babysitters, like the main characters. I don't remember how many there were, which means I was probably thinking I'd have 5 kids. I don't know. I didn't want them, but again, I had no idea you could have a choice. But it was really interesting because looking back, the couples that I knew that I met, and some of them my aunts and uncles were also part of some of these people. The ones that didn't have children, I found so fascinating. There was no conversation around it. I was just like, they didn't have kids. And the first time I remember asking my dad about this, because he has a cousin who her and her husband did not have kids. And I always thought she was the coolest person. And what is really cool, I'm really jumping timeline here, is a few years ago, they were in the audience of the Childfree, I think it was the 2022 Childfree convention, virtual convention. Was a moderator for those for a few years when we did those. And uh, I got actually after I went to my dad's and I got to tell them how much they inspired me. And we had a really in-depth conversation about their choice not to have children. And they are, I think, within the ballpark of 20 years older than I am. And I always admired them from the time I was a little girl. And so to be able to have this full circle moment of talking to them and letting them know how much they inspired me, not because they ever talked about not having kids, it was just a different vibe, a different energy. And I noticed that. I noticed that. And so key people in my life growing up, I have actually been able to have a conversation with them about their choice and why and how I have seen how they've navigated life. And that is why, as uncomfortable as it can be to speak up about not having kids, whether you're online or in person in your social circle, in your church community, wherever, it is important because you never know who is watching. You never know what young person is picking up on your vibe. And it's not because we're trying to talk people into it, or at least I'm not. It's just freaking awareness. And then I got tired of doing that for 6 years, so I stopped. I mean, as invested and time consuming as that was, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So 7 years old, I knew, okay, I guess I have to do that. I don't want to, but okay. So then 15. So now I'm gonna share things that I've never really had an opportunity to share about my conscious decision or even my thought process. because it's important. I find it's important, and it has been really helpful for me to look back at the patterns over my life and go, because I do want to make sure I'm making a decision about any aspect of my life from a real place and letting it evolve. And the nice thing, again, if any of you are worried, the nice thing is you can evolve in your thinking and still stand by your choice and maintain that choice. So don't worry. This is I may not have an answer to who did I become by the end of this episode, but I will not talk myself out of being child free because I'm 43 years old now and I don't want to. I do I my one of my best friends, I don't know if she'll listen to this episode, but she just gave birth to twins and she is 4 years younger than I am. So yes. So I'm an auntie again. Good enough. Good enough. Yeah, that's more than enough. And my nephews are six, at the time of this recording, 16 and 20 and 20. Yes. So, okay, 15. I 15 years old. By then, teenagehood. That is the worst year to ever be alive. 15, brutal, brutal. If you are listening to this and over 15, congratulations for surviving 15 years old. I opened up a teaching studio in my parents' basement when I was 15. It's probably why I'm still here. That was easy. Just the emotional aspect of being 15. But by that point, again, I did not actually think about there being a choice. Now, again, the religion I was raised in, it was just you it wasn't even about the religion at this point. It was that's what you do. You get married, you have children. And there's another part of this is that by that point, I realized that I was bisexual. I had no language for it. I had no language for it. I did not come from an environment where you talked about being gay. It was not a thing in the religion. That was very taboo and wrong, but I knew. I knew at the age of 10. Again, didn't have the language for it, but I knew. So there was the thought of, all right, gonna have to marry a guy. Some things I realize I have to jump ahead just to um for context. I will probably be in a straight passing relationship, and I love that term because, bisexual, you don't know who you're gonna be attracted to. Half the time I'm attracted to nobody, but occasionally I meet a guy where I'm like, yeah, there is one in existence. He might know who he is. I mean, whatever, we're friends. He has to text me. So anyway, okay, focus, Lenora. What you're recording here? This is a slight deflection, because this topic isn't easy, even though I have been speaking about it for years. Even though I've been speaking about it for years, still not always easy because I know I'm going to be sharing things that I'm handing over my diary. You're hearing my deepest thoughts, and there's a purpose for that. So 15, I thought, all right, I'm probably gonna have to you're just gonna get married, you're just gonna have kids, but I want a career. And I was already studying piano and violin from a young age, and I was good. So I knew that I could be a student teacher around, the age of 15. And so with my parents' blessing, as challenging as our relationship was at that point, like I was in family therapy and all these things because I was very angry and rightly so. I got a business license. My dad taught me how to interview people, and I set up shop as a violin instructor, thinking maybe I'd have four students. Well, I had dozens upon dozens upon dozens of phone calls because emailing wasn't, yeah, no, you did email, but this was 1998 for context. Yeah, 1998. So, things were different back then, kids. And I that summer I sent out flyer or what was fly coupons. It was a small city that I lived in Alberta. And as it turns out, there were no violin teachers in my actual city. So you can imagine, to my surprise, well, I got beyond the amount of phone calls I could have imagined. So I interviewed everybody that summer and selected 25 kids. So that was me going into grade 10 high school with 25 students. I was teaching violin. I was studying violin. Like I had my own private lessons. I was studying music theory and I had piano because I was taking exams because my thought was I wanted to be a violinist. I wanted to be a teacher, but I thought if I started young, I could support myself, leave home and go to college. And then if I had to have kids, I could have a full-time career as a music teacher. And I don't know who was going to raise the kids, but I guess like it gave me a career. That's what I really wanted. And I wanted to be a violinist, but not a classical violinist as it turned out because, well, I don't like classical music, even though I'm a classically trained piano and violin player. So that's what happened to me at 15. And immediately my world opened up. So I was doing weddings at 14, but I was allowed to teach. That gave me income. It gave me, okay, plans for college, all that stuff. So while my peers, especially in the religion, were focused on husband, wife, kids right after school, because it wasn't until religion where we couldn't go to school or graduate or anything like that. Like we got to do that. I was full-time teaching. And I did that. And, I mean, that was, I went to college. I was a orchestra instructor for a community orchestra in college. And performing and building my repertoire and still studying and all that stuff. And again, the thought of kids, no, like I had a career, I had a vision, I had focus, I had freedom. And in the back of my mind, because I remember having conversations with just a couple friends about this, it was like, okay, at 22, that means 25. I think by that point, at least for people like my peers, my female peers, we were all going to college. Now, the ones that was in the religion with, and I had left that, it was hovering around it, but I had largely like pulled away. I wasn't getting married, so this conversation did not apply to them. It was those that I knew outside of the religion. We were all thinking 25 is a good age to get married and have kids. Never once in that point, prior to the age of 22, did I realize that it was a choice. I ignored it, the fact that one day that would happen. And there's one piece of information here that I'm about to share. So if you are related to me and do not want to know about my sex life, please plug your ears. Okay, your ears are plugged. If they're not, what I'm about to tell you next, I'm not apologizing for. So I was actually a virgin until I was 26 years old. That story is incredibly scandalous. It involves a married couple and another person. And some of you know this because I've shared it openly. I've shared it on the Child for Girls podcast. And that will be a book. And I know many of you going, yeah, but you've been talking about this book for years. Well, I'm doing the podcast first and then there'll be the book. Like I said, if you're related to me, there are things that I will be sharing here that you probably don't ever want to know. But let me put it this way. I've never lived like a nun. Never aspired to, never will. So, um, for those of you going, yeah, birth control, abortion, blah, 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 blah. Look, I was a 26-year-old virgin, okay? And that was by choice. That was by choice. Um, I've always been a tease and then kind of like leave me the F alone. Okay. So, and I still kind of operate like that, but I'm not a virgin anymore. Don't worry. Well, you can worry. I don't care. So, so there was that, and that is important to share because, they're like, well, accidents happen. I'm like, fuck off with that. We live in a pro-choice country, and I've been very open about my stance on abortion. I'm fully support it, and I've let anybody know, look, if I mean, I am protected as much as I can be. I'm not sterilized. I did not go that route. I used IUD, and not all my lovers have been men. So, and again, been lucky in many aspects. There's a lot of things I have not experienced, fortunately, and it's accidental pregnancies have never been part of my story any reason. So again, and I'll stop there for a second because when it comes to being child free, and there's so much I will share, and maybe we'll have to share in multiple episodes over the next little while. But when you know that you don't want to have children, and you get to the realization that it's a choice, and you're strong in your choice to the point that you know that, first of all, yes, accidents do happen, but they don't have to be maintained, if you know what I mean, right? I mean, again, I live in Canada. We're a pro-choice country. I live in a big city. I have resources, access to resources that don't cost money as well, right? So I realize I'm fortunate in that case because there are a lot of people who aren't. And it's a strong calling to not have children. That's really, if you don't want to watch the whole episode and you want to end it here, that's really what it comes down to. When you know you don't want to have children and you realize you have a choice. And I do believe life supports you in that one, in that way, in that choice. Meaning the people you come across, the friends you have, the resources, the any support, partners, you know? I mean, it's an ongoing thing. It's an on like you're this is where I struggle with content that exists and the shallowness of it. Because again, it has its point, it has a purpose. It brings the conversation to the surface. But it's so much deeper than that, especially when you know deep down it, like it's your soul calling to not have children, which is very much the case. And I can explain more later why, and I will. But if you just want to cut this short and get right to the point, like it's a deeper calling. And your world will support that. Maybe not the stupid people online, maybe not your great grandmother's, I don't know, nephew. I don't know where I was going with that, but like there will be people that will question you. But even that, I think, is designed to make you toughen your stance. That's how I felt about online trolls for a long time until I got good at figuring out how to deal with them, right? So that, like, again, it's a much deeper. There's a lot of depth in this choice to not have children, and there are a lot of people that don't believe that, don't understand it. And that's on them. That's not for you to explain, just so you know. So continuing on, age 22. Age 22 was when the light bulb went off. That year, and I've shared this before, that year was hard. My mom passed away. I was just turned 22. She had just turned 47. My 19-year-old brother, yeah, my brother just turned 19. Mom dies. A month later, I find out, or my brother tells me, that he is having a baby with his ex-girlfriend. Oh yeah, and well no, we had to put the family dog down later. Anyway, I wasn't living at home. I was teaching violin full time. I was performing. I was living my career and thinking in the back of my brain, okay, I am 22, so I have 3 more years until I have to settle down, get married, and have children. If I'm thinking like that, that's a clue that this is not for you, Lenora. I always felt that marriage later in life I would experience once, and by later I mean the age I am now. So, someone has to text me. Someone did text me, but it's not that. It's not that person. Yeah, and I don't think we'd make a good couple. For a long time, I've always been single. I've always been publicly single, and I was very vocal during the Childfree Girls podcast about being publicly single because I was, and I still am single technically, but my mindset has shifted because I've worked on myself to the point where I'm like, no, I see, I do feel called that I am to be a partner to somebody. I don't know who. Actually, I might know who, but that's not guaranteed, so I don't know. That's evolving, and uh yeah. Yeah. You'll be like, "All right, tell me." No, it's a story. It's a story. Anyway, I'm getting all flustered now. So I like this person, but again, I don't chase people. So at 22, though, I knew that that was not my time. But all my world shifted rapidly. Mom passes. I'm in my dream career. I'm living on my own. Been to college. Very independent woman, rah, 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 which I absolutely love because it always scared me meeting so many women who did not know how to function after their husbands passed because they didn't know how to check the insurance policy. things like that. I mean, I live in a time where it's very normal for women. I live in a time and a city, country where, sorry, I'm hitting the desk all over the place here, where it's very it's normal, and yeah, it's normal for women to live like I do. I live by myself in a townhouse that's a family-sized townhouse, and I can support myself and all these things, right? It's normal, which I'm lucky. But there's still that commentary, it's being misunderstood. And this is everything that I have done as I reflect back, including my choice to not have kids, it was actually a calling. And people don't understand that. And that's fine. That's fine. But I'm going to vocalize that. It's a freaking calling. Just like it is a calling for you to have 300 children or two or one or try to have a child because you're feeling called to it. Being child free is no different. Like when, like, not ev I don't believe that every child free by choice person has that calling. There are many reasons why people don't have kids. They're fearful of something. They are looking at the world and going, this is a dumpster fire. Why bother? All these things are valid. But this is where, and this is, I can articulate this now, but I couldn't articulate this back when I was doing my advocacy work. And I don't even really know if the child free community is really ready to hear something like this. But as a whole, because the clickbait thing is very real and it drives me bonkers, but that's okay. I'm aging out of that. I've aged out of that, I think. That's just my personal opinion. But I need depth to things. I need depth. I need depth of understanding my own choice, my own life. And to me, it has always been a calling to not have kids. I did not understand why until recently, but it has been a calling. And that is why it's scary when rights are being taken away. And come after me if you think, oh, rights are not being taken away. Again, I don't live in that country where there are, but I do keep my eye on things, right? And there are cultures that don't support choices like this. And I know a lot of you come from cultures where it's very challenging to live as a child-free person, whether you're male, female, single, couple, whatever, right? And those are things that I became aware of and became more empathetic as a person because I didn't have kids and because I chose or felt called or was dragged to be outspoken and speak publicly about these things. Again, I'm jumping a bit ahead a bit here, but you hear that it's very common for people to go, I became a better person after I had children. I believe that. I believe that because that was their path. It's not mine. You know what made I'm not a naturally super empathetic person. I'm a figure your shit out, deal with it, and then tell me about it. Don't ask me to help you, right? But because I became outspoken about my child free choice, that led me to advocacy work. That led me to sitting in rooms, virtual and real. And it led me to conversations that had me listen, learn how to listen to male, female, non-binary experiences, the hardships that they face. I have it easy. I have it incredibly easy over here, right? I did not really know empathy or to express empathy or to be in that space until I started becoming a moderator accidentally. I was, the podcast, the Child Free Girls podcast was not my idea. I was asked if I wanted to co-host and we developed it together, the three of us. I didn't know any of that stuff. I was always outgoing and talkative, yes, but did I know how to listen? Did I really know how to connect with people beyond the performance? Because I never resonated with people my age. I never felt called to the religious community I grew up in. School, I was always a social butterfly. I was never the wallflower in the corner. I know that's hard to believe. But I never fit in anywhere. I never felt I could be myself or vocalize. So I channeled it through music. I channeled it through whatever work I was doing, right? And it was mainly music and teaching at the time because people could understand that. But it wasn't until I had this weird calling to go talk about being child free. And because of that, I found myself in settings where I had to lead the conversation just by sharing, by hosting, by moderating. And I heard a gamut of people's experiences. terrible, good, wonderful, horrifying. And that's where I learned empathy. So, and that's also where I learned how what friendship really means. I've always had friends, but realizing that I can share and be myself and the right people surround you and you can show up and be engaging and supportive even if you guys have different day-to-day lives and different ideas, but the whole empathy piece, and this is what surprises me when I think back to that question, who did I become? And I don't necessarily have an answer, but this is why I'm sharing because I'm realizing like I became more empathetic or understanding and able to connect with people more. You could say, well, you can do that with having kids. That's true, but that wasn't my path. So being child free was the first part, making that decision, knowing, following my intuition that I was not meant to have children. I physically could have children from what I know, but I didn't want them. Why? And that answer is always unfolding because the first thing that I'll land with was I'll go back to teaching. So I've always liked kids. Kids like me, and we get along. I just don't want them living with me, right? So, because I like living by myself. Or if one day the whole partner thing happens and we decide we want to have a house instead of two separate houses, 'cause I love the idea of two separate houses. But I've lived alone for a very long time, and it's lovely. And it's lovely. But for those of you that worry about the whole Christmas thing, I didn't celebrate Christmas growing up, and my Christmas tree's up all the time. So don't give me the whole loneliness at Christmas, blah, 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 blah. That is your fear. You are projecting. You're having children to cover that fear. Good luck. So, teaching, I loved teaching. I loved being a violin player. I had fantastic teachers as a child. I had a fantastic orchestra instructor as a kid. And because of that, my calling was not to be a mother. My calling at the time was to be an amazing violin teacher, not because I was the best player, not because I was the best teacher, but I could understand what the children needed to learn one of the hardest instruments you can possibly play. So, I developed a teaching system. And because I was not thinking about having kids, again, in the back of my mind, I thought, well, one day I'll have to. I didn't even think of the mechanics of having kids. It's not that I didn't know. It's just, it was gross. It was gross. The thought of it, so I didn't think about it. But I taught for 10 years, and that was my career, my first career. And I was so invested in it, and I loved it. And I also knew that if I'm gonna, and I thought that this is what I would do for the rest of my life. I thought that would be the only thing I would do was teach and perform. And teaching would be like the main thing, and then I'd perform. I would build my performance, weddings, corporate events. I was doing that a lot, but there was always the teaching element, right? And I never thought that I would do or life would take. I never thought that life would take me another direction, which it eventually did. So I would teach during the day and teach in the evenings, and as the years progressed, I took weekends off, and I performed all summer. I would take the summers off and all that stuff. And every time I would just fully throw myself into teaching because I loved it so much. I was so passionate. When I'm passionate about something, that's it. I mean, that's how it was with doing child-free advocacy for 6 years. I was so passionate. That is all I did. So, by the way, if you're my future husband, good luck to you because if I'm passionate about you, well, I'll do other things, but. Um, so at the end of the day, when I was finished teaching, I was always thankful that I was going home to my own apartment with no kids. And through that time leading up to the decision, which I still have to explain, I was thinking, how can I give all this energy to what I truly love, to these kids, to the multitude of children that I've been teaching over the years, and then go home and raise my own children? It didn't make any sense. It didn't add up. Here's the thing. I was not interested. It really does not matter any excuse. I could give you 50 reasons why, but none of them are as true as what's actually true. I have no desire. And I think a lot of us who And I think that's true for many of us. We have no desire. And people will throw all the fear things at us, you know? Who will take care of you? What happens if you fall? Look, I was on a date. I fell and broke my freaking ankle. That guy was child free. He was also completely useless. You can go back to listen to the very first episode of this podcast I ever created called I Lowered My Standards and Broke My Ankle. I did not do that in video at the time. I should have. Yeah, go listen to that. It's hilarious. It's scary, but hilarious. But like again, all the fear things you hear. And then on the flip side, you hear all the, well, my love expanded so much, which I don't doubt. I don't doubt. But here's the thing. That was your calling to experience that. Of course, you probably never felt any kind of level of love until you had children because that was the only way you were going to, right? And this is one thing that I've noticed with all the content that's out there that continues because there are always kind of similar kinds of content, right? And everyone has a different delivery, which is fine. You know, there will be people that will experience the most joyful things, right? That do not involve children. And then you will have people that will say in comments going, well, I experienced that with kids and without kids, and I prefer with kids. And so they assume that the person who is experiencing the most euphoric experiences that do not involve children, they are thinking that they can't possibly feel as happy as they do with their kids because when they were doing it without kids, they didn't feel that same level of euphoria as the other person did. It's really not that complicated, people. That was your path, was to experience a level with children because there were other lessons you needed to learn in that. That's fine. No one's taking that away from you. But the person that is experiencing that level of euphoria without children is also experiencing that level because that is their path. And if you can't accept it, that's totally fine. But those of us who are, you know, on the path that we know, whether it's a kid path or a not kid path, we know. And that's what matters. It's really not that complicated. Why are we making it that complicated? Seriously. Ugh. I guess that's the internet. Yeah, it's not my first day on the internet. I get that. And these were things that as I was doing my online advocacy work and whatnot, and there was in-person stuff as well. Um, I wasn't able to quite articulate it because I understood it intellectually, but I need to speak on things that I really feel connected to, and it's taken me a pause to get to that point, especially on this topic, because this topic fires people up. And initially, when I started speaking publicly about being child free, it was first of all, I was writing in a blog because I wasn't going to show my face. I didn't want to be videoed. Didn't want to be photographed. Like I was not comfortable with that at all. And then an idea came with the Child for Girls podcast, and I liked that idea more than I was scared to appear on camera. And that's, you know, that was part of my evolution. That has been part of my evolution, just like doing this show solo and really speaking from a deeper place than I've ever spoken in my life publicly, because my friends know me this way, but, you know, publicly, I haven't done a whole lot this way. And this is what I actually want to do. You know, it's taken me a minute to evolve to this point, and then it's going to expand, right? So, and being and not having kids, it's the same thing because when I look back, again, 22. Okay. So let me, when I look back, I realize, wow, I love teaching and I don't want to do this and raise children. And I actually don't want to raise kids. So then it was like, well, then don't. You have a choice. And that actually came to my mind at 22 when I was thinking about, okay, well, that 25 year, you know, being 25 and marriage and kids, and that was like looming 3 years to live my life the way I truly want to live it, and then I have to have children. Well, something's wrong with that here. And then all that stuff happened. Mom dying, brother at 19 saying he's going to be a dad. Was not happy about that. I love my nephews, but I was not happy about that. And they were keeping the child, and my brother, you know, was going to raise the child, and that's a very complicated story, but my brother has, you know, been a single dad for 21 years, coming up 21 years. The cool thing about that though, so th this leads into why was I called to being child free? Well, my first nephew was, oh, sorry, one thing before that. The first person I told that I realized I had a choice and realized I was going to choose not to have children was my dad. I went back home because I wasn't living at home. I left home at 18. And after my mom d died, I would go back to our family home and dad stayed in that family home until he sold the house and then built another house. And he, I went to visit him after mom died and I remember sitting on the floor. I was petting one of the family dogs and I said I realized that it's a choice to not have kids and I'm not going to have them. And that was it. And my dad said, like, you don't have to because he came from a large family. Like his father had 16 children and his sisters don't have children and some of his brothers don't have children. My mom's brother didn't have children and his probably favorite relative, the cousin I was talking about, they don't have children. Like it was no skin off my dad's nose for me not to have kids. Plus, he just found out that his 19-year-old son was having a child out of wedlock. And, my dad's still involved in that religion, but my dad's cool now with all that. So I wasn't seeking validation, but I just realized, and it was peaceful. And that choice has always been peaceful. And that's the beautiful part of it, because as you get older, and I will say this as a seasoned 43-year-old, as you get older, you 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 calm down a bit, and look at things with more perspective, obviously. Hopefully. If you don't, well, try 50. And what I realized is I didn't know because so at 7 years old, I'm looking at this and going, no, I don't want to do that. I was drawn to people who didn't have kids. I loved my aunts and uncles, and it took me a minute to calm down from the fact that my brother was going to have children at 19 and keep the child. And okay, that's fine. And I was not happy that this was happening because that was weird and never thought about it. But what the reality of that was is that I was actually called to be an aunt. I would have not planned my brother to have kids under the circumstances that he had children. I mean, it would again, but that was my brother's path, and I had, I mean, what could I do about it? Nothing. But when my first nephew was born, and he was born on my birthday, so at 23 years old, I became an aunt, and any kind of animosity I had towards the situation went out the window the minute my oldest nephew was born. And people could say, well, you'll feel that same way about your child. It's different when you have to birth it and you're responsible for it at that level. And it's not your calling. This is the thing. And I know that a lot of people won't understand that, and that's fine. It's not my place to convince you. I'm just sharing this here. So immediately, and then over the next 2 years, because I was very involved in both my nephews' lives, and that was a calling. And that's the difference for me. You can be interested in something. You can think something is cool and want to try it and all this stuff. I don't care if it's a vacation or having children, right? And then there's the, okay, society pressure. This is what expected. It's biology, it's natural, it's normal. It's what's the only way to be. It's your only purpose in life, blah, 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 blah. What is calling you? You know, the opportunity arises. You still have a choice. I did not, I didn't have to be in my nephew's lives. I didn't have to be, I mean, technically would always be an aunt, but I didn't have to be Auntie Lenora. But I felt a very strong pull to do that. And so that was my path. And I chose that. And I loved it, still love it. But I knew it was really important for me to be in my nephew's lives at a certain level and in their formative years, meaning before the age of 12 for both of them. So my first nephew was born on my 23rd birthday. My second nephew was born 5 years later, 4.5 years later. And I was very dedicated. Like I had my own life, I had my career, I had, I lived in a different town, I traveled, did all my things. I did all my life. But the house, like where I lived, I made sure I had a spare bedroom. Where I currently live, I have 3 bedrooms. One of them is a podcast studio. I have 3 bathrooms. I live by myself. I mean, this has been a haven for my nephews over the years, right? And now they've moved across Canada. So I use all the rooms and all the closets and all the bathrooms. Right? And I wasn't raising anybody's children. I wasn't babysitting. I was auntie. Even the car I drive, four-door sedan. Well, the first one was a four-door sedan, now it's a four-door SUV type thing. Because I was thinking, well, my nephews will get bigger, they need room. Like, I did, and I did not get in. I never, I stayed single. I always had companionship. That was never an issue. But I purposely did not attempt to have a really deep, serious, committed relationship because I felt really called to be an aunt to my nephews. I did not really understand that at the time, but so much time has passed. My oldest nephew's graduated. You know, they are now going through their own identity, discovering who they are, and now into adulthood and many other things that I'm not at liberty to share. But that it's been a 21 year commitment that I look back at and go, it totally makes sense I didn't want to have children. Because of the circumstances of my brother's life, I wouldn't have known that at age 7, right? I wouldn't have known what I know now is that what I was called to be was an aunt, a hands-on aunt. Again, with my own life. I have seen aunthood specifically in the childless space where it's all consuming and full identity, and I'm not that person. And that's why I never really shared it too much in child-free spaces because child-free is like we're not caring for kids. Like I didn't want to be a guardian. Like don't get me wrong, I'm not going down that road, and I'm very not like the when it comes to step parent like that. No, no kids. No, 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 no. My calling was and is to be an aunt, and I fulfilled that in the formative years. And I'm still an aunt. I still, talk to them, see them, text them, although they live across Canada now. And Canada, if you don't know, is a very large country, not population wise, but land mass wise. And so, it takes longer than 2 hours to drive anywhere across Canada. But my point is that the older I get, the more I live, the more I realize there are more reasons why I don't have kids, right? Though I was called to that. That is constantly revealing itself. And what bothers me, and bother might be not the correct term, but okay, let me put it this way. What I'm witnessing is that generally the internet is not ready to kind of have that conversation. That's fine. And that's really why I stepped away from my advocacy work. Because I'm not interested in talking about all the things we acquire, all the trips we can take, all the vacations we can have. Some of the wealthiest people I know in the world have children. They have better lives than a lot of child-free people that I know. They're more educated, right? They like all the things that drive us that we have, people with kids can have that too. It's a different energy though, right? It's a different energy. It's a different, like I've never wanted to have children, so I'm not missing anything. I'm not worried about anything. I'm developing my life and building my life and aware of certain issues that are relevant to people that don't have children. And the nice thing about this world now is that we are talking about it and things are being more developed. So all this fear crap that we're hearing in comments and snide remarks in person and in society or in your group settings or culture or family or wherever, it's coming from an old mindset, right? And that is shifting. It is annoying because we have to go through all that. And if there's anything specific, go back and watch the old me of well, not old me, but like watch the old episodes of Child Free Girls because we talk about many of those topics, and that's the only child free content I'm going to promote because I'm very proud of that show. Not that I'm not proud of anything else, but always be marketing. We also have a book. We also have a book. I'll link that all in everywhere. So again, the question, who have I become being child free? Who am I going to be? The question, the answer is ever evolving. The whole point is to get me to stop and think what has transpired in my life, not on the surfacey element of it, right? Because again, I mean, there's so many things that I can achieve, and it's very common to see, oh, because I didn't have kids, I can do this, 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 and this, and I don't doubt that it's true. On an intellectual level, it's like, well, and this is me being the moderator because I read both sides of the conversation. It's like, well, you're pushing mediocrity here. Now, that's not my personal opinion, but I don't love it when people say that because I'm like, what? So you're not smart enough to do it with kids? Like the point is you didn't want them. You have no desire for that, right? That's really what it comes down to. But we all have, believe me. I mean, you go watch the older stuff from Child for Girls and my delivery then has evolved. So I stand by what I said. I probably would word things a little bit different in a lot of cases just because, but also my thought processes, my understanding and awareness has evolved as well. So I don't knock any of that. I'm not interested in producing that kind of content myself. So I don't. I don't. But what I will say, and for anyone that is reflective of the choice and whatever feelings are coming up, and even though, we make our choice from a place of peace, from a place of contentment, we are all still going through the shitstorm of being human, which is a lot. And just because we don't have kids does not mean we don't have anxiety or we don't know love or we don't have purpose or we don't have meaning. Or sometimes we're just floating in space. And sometimes people get emotional and cry on camera. And that's like, well, you don't have kids, so no wonder you're sobbing. I saw that recently from a child-free by choice person. And that was kind of what made me go, I need to just share from, even though I don't want to talk about this topic regularly on this show. Like I'll always be child-free and speak from that point of view. But specifically on this topic, I realized that there's nothing wrong with being emotional. And when I first spoke about all these, all this in my early days with the Child for Girls podcast and then with other things that I did online, it was my choice was from a place of peace. The reason for speaking out was more from a place of anger and annoyance and frustration. And I'm glad I did what I did because that's where my true friend circle expanded. The people in my life who are my friends, I know who they are. The ones that have been with me since, childhood, the few of them still left to that. No, everyone's still alive, but not everyone can come with you. As I said the other day, I said people can climb up the mountain with you, but they can't necessarily meet you at or be with you at the mountaintop, right? So I things are always evolving. But what it led for me was realizing the kind of friend I could become, I became and am, much to my surprise, because I finally connected with people that deeply resonated with me and not because we do the same things, but it was leading with the fact that we don't want to have children. I had no idea I needed child-free friends until I started talking about being child-free. And then first it was my collaborators with Child Free Girls, who are still my friends. And then many other online ventures that I've done and I've met people in person and all these things. Like my world opened up tremendously. And again, that's my journey, right? That's not necessarily your journey, but it's my journey. And that's the point. And I have no idea how long I've been talking for. So I realize there's so much more to say. And I've probably left out a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I didn't have a plan. The whole point was to pose a question and to speak just from a place of depth. And I see it's getting darker outside and my makeup's probably all falling off now, but my wig's still on, so hey, that's great. All right, bringing it to you for a second. So I have created space in this podcast for audience interaction, and that's where the favorites come in. So again, the favorites is a play on my name, Faye. And it came to me, gosh, almost 2 years ago now. And I'm like, ooh, that's cute. So we're going to be incorporating something called favorite feedback. And now I realize I have favorite feedback, but I forgot to cue it up for this. So I'm going to not have favorite feedback in this episode. Favorite feedback is comments, insights, anything that people have sent me either in DMs on Instagram or TikTok. I now have, so lenorafay.com will lead you to the Substack, which is actually where this podcast is posted on or hosted on. And then it goes to Apple and it goes to Spotify and it goes to YouTube and probably a few other places, but it's also on video. So wherever you're listening or wherever you're watching, you can leave a comment and you can say it's for favorite feedback, which means I will read it in the show as time allows and as I begin incorporating this. I've also created an email address where you can send it if you want to send it privately and not have your comment or story public. And if you want to send it to me privately, and let me know if you just want to send it to me to respond to, or if you want me to read it out as part of favorite feedback. It's audience interaction. Again, whatever you've heard on this show that resonates with you or you disagree with, believe me, I don't need yes people. You know, we're here. It's a conversation, but I'm not interviewing people and I'm not doing co-hosts. Like I need a space to speak. And that's what the Lenora Faye show is. But I want to hear from you. And so I know there have been a few things and I have to gather that because this version of the show is new with video and I'm developing space for favorite feedback. And also if you go to Substack, I don't think you have to subscribe to it, but you can if you want. It's free. It comes to your inbox. But there's also a chat section. So I've posted where you can actually share your thoughts related to the show. If you send me stuff that's not related to what I've ever talked about or whatever, doesn't mean I won't incorporate that, but we'll see how it goes. The show is evolving and it's new, right? So we're gonna do that. So that is favorite feedback. So to wrap up this episode, because like I said, I don't know how long I've been talking for, and most of this is unedited. Who have we become as child-free people? You don't have to answer because I probably have not answered that. It's to bring awareness to for ourselves. We're not here to convince anybody. We're not here to convince people to not have kids. At least I am not, right? I have many thoughts about how things are done, blah, 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 but that's not the point. It's that there is something that is called you. There's something that's called me to be child free. Sorry, I did not mean to rhyme. And my journey was that I needed to be available to be the kind of aunt that my nephews needed, which sounds funny from a child-free perspective. But that's an honest one. It's an honest one for me. You can hate kids, I don't care, right? It doesn't matter. This has been my journey. What continues to be my journey now is who am I going to become now, right? And this is where I am so glad that I got over my fear or not even I'm not even getting over it. It's when I realized that after an incident at my grandmother's funeral where the lighting's changing because the sun is setting. I'm like, what's going on here? My face is so shiny. Uh my 33, that's another milestone. 33, 32, 33. My grandmother died at a funeral, a relative who I've since told her that I wasn't going to have kids. She said that my time would come because she was 38 when she had her first child and I was, under 35 and I did not defend myself. And that was the thing. I said, yeah, okay. And I didn't say anything. I didn't say, oh, I'm not having children. I just kind of trailed off because I wasn't even, that wasn't the conversation I was expecting to have. And it bothered me for so long that I Googled how to start a blog and I eventually started a blog and that led to me meeting people who became Child for Girls co-hosts with me and, Child Free Convention, Child Free Morning Chat, all the places you've seen me before in the Child Free space and now leading up to the Lenora Faye show. That all those things, and this is actually I'll make that point for anyone that's struggling with whether you're dealing with people online or fearful because of people trolling online or your own family, again, social circle, religious circle, wherever you're feeling pressured. This is not what I'm going to suggest, and I don't like, this is not a how-to, but this is something that's tangible that I stand by because this is helpful. As hard as it is when you realize that those people who are seemingly opposing you or with the best intentions worried that because you're not having kids, all this stuff is going to happen or you're not going to have whatever, it will probably strengthen your choice and your feeling about your choice. If it doesn't, that's also a clue. Like if you're a fence sitter, now I'm not saying that do anything out of fear. I don't recommend that because we're gonna the things we fear, I think, are still gonna show up anyway. It has to be a real choice. And sometimes that it's so buried deep down what you really want to do. It's hard to get to that point. It really is. I'm believe me, I know. Not on this topic. Like this is child free is not a topic that I struggle with. But there are other elements, and it's really being ready to be in a relationship. Like, I mean, an actual relationship that's fun and sexy and vibrant, but me not being single. Okay. But there was a reason why I was single for a long time, right? And it was actually very connected to my calling to be an aunt. I was available on an emotional, financial, all the levels that those kids deserved and that I felt called to be because I had a lot of freedom. I also had the emotional freedom from not having children. Like there are many things. And because but again, remember, this was my path. That does not mean that's your path. You know, for anyone all up in arms of, well, I have kids and I got to do all those things. That's great. That was what you were meant to do, right? This is what I'm meant to do. And to realize that, to feel it when I speak it, when I say it out loud, the feeling I have is from a very certain place and like a place of certainty. I mean, and that is amazing. That is amazing. And that comes with time and experience and being trolled heavily and all the things. So I say that as encouragement. Take it for what you will. And on that note, I'm going to end this episode because it's probably been 5 hours that I've been talking. And again, any thoughts, questions, insights, disagreements, please let me know. There will be a title card at the end of this or in the show notes, wherever you're listening. And happy International Child Free Day if you're listening to this on August 1st. If not, well, we'll catch you next year. So with that, thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will chat again soon.